Okay. And Sarah, I'm also trying to record, so hopefully we're good to go on that front. So the importance of data and why we collect it for the point in time count, I do want to state up front, especially for the new arrival population and especially those who are newly arriving to the city. We don't use individual client level identifying data for anything. We only report and analyze the data at an aggregate population level. And so when we collect data, it's important, I think, for all of you to know this and also to reiterate to your residents that the surveys are anonymous. They have to consent and it's voluntary to participate in the homeless survey count part. And, if they're uncomfortable with certain questions, they're of course always able to skip that. But we do try to uphold and make sure that those who are interested, we gather as much information as we can to have an understanding of population needs. And, that kind of goes for all individuals, families, veterans, unaccompanied youth, and those who are experiencing longer term or chronic homelessness. And so the data that we collect surrounding these groups really drives a lot of our planning, program development, policy work, and system changes, which is why we try to get accurate data. So kind of what I've said before, this drives a lot of important understandings of like trends in our system in Chicago. We adjust types of programming and service accessibility that are available in the city based off of the point in time count. It also helps to justify requests and advocacy for more funding and resources, especially for, as we've seen the new arrival system shift and change over the last year alone. It helps us to comply with reporting requirements from HUD and also just raise public awareness about the issue, both in the city and on a national scale, and measure community progress towards preventing and ending homelessness as well. So it's obviously critically important and mandated by HUD. But it's something that we do have a report every year that we release, and we can put the report link in the chat for all of you in a moment. But it can be something that is hopefully informative for our providers and our community on the ground doing the work. So just also want to make that plug. Okay, and as you may know, the point in time count, there's a lot of different components of it, so it requires a good amount of coordination. We, of course, have the sheltered count, which is the majority of the shelters in here are included as part of the shelter count. And then for O'Hare and the landing zone, those locations are considered to be unsheltered because they're not places where individuals or families will stay long-term in shelter. It's a temporary spot to ensure that intake is done and all of those things. So different programs and locations like that's the one designation between some of the new arrival programs is like all of your shelters will be part of the shelter count, and then the landing zone and O'Hare will be considered to be part of unsheltered. But regardless of that delineation, there's a variety of partners that really work to coordinate across the implementation and execution of the point in time count. And so we have All Chicago. They're the lead agency of our continuum of care. They do all of the homeless management data system work. So HMIS is what we call that. They coordinate the housing bed inventory count. DFSS coordinates the sheltered count, the unsheltered count, and we have a youth count that's being implemented this year. So we kind of drive all three of those parts of the programming for the PIT. Of course, our shelter providers and our providers at O'Hare and the landing zone are super integral and important to making sure that we can get an accurate count and good data. And then, of course, we have our new arrival clients and residents who, if they're willing to participate and complete this 10 to 15-minute survey, are also a really important piece of the work that we're all doing. So this year's count, I kind of went over a few of these elements already, but the sheltered count it starts a little bit earlier in the evening than the unsheltered count. And the reason for that is because in unsheltered situations, some folks who live in outside street locations may not be settled down for the night until a little bit later. And it just helps reduce our double counting or potentially missing people if we do the unsheltered count a little bit later into the night. So just to flag if the O'Hare and landing zone teams are on here, You'll be using the same survey to do the point in time count, but your time in which you will collect your information or start the surveys and the tallies will be from 9 p.m. Probably not till 3 in the morning, but like 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. And then for the shelter count, so for all of the other new arrival shelter providers, you'll be doing your survey and tallying of all residents from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And we'll share a little bit more about the logistics surrounding that and what you should be communicating to your residents. But all new arrival shelters are required to be a part of this count. And we do have a partnership with the Salvation Army, which many of you may know. They are our kind of shelter request transport partner for the city. So shelter request transfers will be paused during the sheltered count from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., but then we'll continue later into the night during the rest of the unsheltered count. So just wanted to flag that as something to be aware of. And then you can see at the bottom, we have our supplemental youth count, which will be over a longer period of time. There's a little bit more flexibility with the dates for that based off of HUD's guidance. So that's just something for all of you to be aware of. Okay, I think, Sarah, I'm turning it over to you on this slide.
All right. So how's the sheltered pit count conducted? That's why you guys are here. Again, you're a really instrumental part of the count, and our resources as a city are limited, so we can't do this alone. So we really appreciate your participation on this. We do ask that shelter staff inform clients about the count prior to next Thursday, January 25th. Just kind of letting them know that it's coming up and what it is, so that people aren't like confused or concerned on the night of the count is always kind of beneficial. And then also coordinating and ensuring all clients are present in the shelter prior to the start of the count. Prior to the count, we would ask that you kind of become familiar with the data collection instruments that need to be completed for the count. And then also on the night of the count, we ask that shelters mandate a 6 p.m. curfew for clients, except those who are working or in school. We know obviously this can be quite difficult and that there might be people who don't necessarily comply, but we do ask that you attempt to kind of put that 6 p.m. curfew in place for specifically the night of January 25th, so that you can have everybody on site in case they need to be surveyed. And then for O'Hare and the landing zone specifically, the count will start later in the evening. It'll start at 9 p.m. and it'll go till about midnight to account for less movement of folks later into the night. So yours is just a slightly different timeline than the 7 to 10 p.m. that the shelters will be conducting their count. And so kind of count data collection methods. So there's two different ways that you'll be collecting data on the night of the count. And so the first is a survey. All programs must survey at least 10% of the households residing in shelter on the night of the count. We recommend about 16 surveys for one staff member if you're trying to think about how many staff you need participating in the count. We only survey adults from family households, so unaccompanied youth that might be at your site can be surveyed, but children and families should not be surveyed. We ask that you choose the head of household, which again is kind of the single adult in their own household or the parent or guardian in a family household, to be surveyed randomly. And then if an individual does not consent to being surveyed, that you move on to the next person until again you reach that 10% of households amount. And so some of the ways that you can randomize your sample are placing head of household names into a paper bag and picking randomly until you reach 10% of the households, or assigning households numbers and selecting those numbers randomly and then surveying the head of that household. There's kind of a variety of ways in which you could do it, but just making sure that it's random. And then, for example, if there's 1,000 residents at a family shelter that you run and 400 family units or households within the shelter that make up that 1,000 people, you're going to need to survey 10% of the 400 households by randomly selecting which households get surveyed for 40 heads of households. So there will be 40 surveys done. They will be done for heads of households, and that is 10% of your 400 households. If you have any questions, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, does anyone have any questions around this? I know a few questions came up when I joined on Wednesday, but we just want to make sure that this is clear I know head of household might be a little bit confusing of a term, but just want folks to feel like this makes sense, what we put on this slide for the surveying.
Hi, I'm Ismael with New Life Centers. I'm the community care coordinator on the team. One question that I have is New Life Centers, we're both at a shelter site here in our neighborhood on 2634 South Pulaski, but we also have a team at the landing zone. Do we need to conduct a survey at the landing zone as well, or is this just for the shelter?
That's a good question. So I am actually meeting with the folks who run the landing zone, including Catholic Charities and New Life Contacts on Monday to finalize the way in which we're going to implement it there, just because I know folks have been at Harold Washington with the cold weather. I will follow up with the landing zone site and you'll hear kind of the finalizing of this process, but we are going to be implementing at all of the shelters, O'Hare and the landing zone, this methodology. We'll be finalizing the coordination for that at the landing zone on Monday. So I'll follow up with your teams to let you know.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. And I know it's a little bit, the landing zone in O'Hare, you have different numbers that fluctuate. And so, I think it's just one of those things where staff should just be prepared. And if you can have a few additional staff who watch this training, if people weren't able to come live to the training today, we're attempting and trying to record it right now so that we can share the recording with you and your teams. And so hopefully folks can get the information from this training to be prepared in case there are, a few more families or individuals on the point in time count night, which is next Thursday, the 25th.
All right.
So we will be in communication. We're aware of the situation and just want to make sure that you all feel supported. So I'll follow up with you guys soon about the landing zone.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I will just clarify one more thing about the heads of households, especially for family households. There might be like two parents that are likely considered to be the main guardians of the family. And it will be when you do this process, let's say you have a list of all of the guardians or the parents of the household who would be considered head of household. You want to make sure that you only have one head of household for each family unit. And that's just to make sure that from the list, each household basically has the same probability or chance of being selected. So I'll just reiterate that again. If you have family households, you only want to put one of the parents or guardians from that household on your head of household list. And so when you pull the names at random from that list, it gives all of the families the same opportunity to complete the survey. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, then I will talk about the other sort of kind of data collection method as well here, and that is the tally sheet. Data collected each year regarding the number and demographics of those that are staying in your program. On the night of the count, the tally sheet collects information on every person that is staying in your program on the night of the count, not just the 10% or anything like that. And so we will give you this. It is an Excel sheet that I will show you in a moment, and you will fill it out regarding everyone on site. You can complete it with clients, or you can utilize your other kind of intake forms or databases to correctly fill in the tally for every client on site. I know that a lot of you have a lot of people on site, and so going based off of kind of your database or census of sorts of who is on site might be an easier way than trying to necessarily go person by person. So that is definitely okay. And so moving on to the tally sheet here, I will be pulling up a different version that's easier to see, so don't worry there, but it's updated slightly for those of you who may have participated last year with us. And so again, all sites, including O'Hare and the landing zone, will complete the Excel tally spreadsheet, including information on every client on site on the night of the count on January 25th, and then we'll email it up over to us at dfsshomeless@cityofchicago.org by the close of business, 5 p.m. on Friday, January 26th. So you have a little bit more time that you could, to be completing this realistically, just regarding the people that were there on the night of the 25th. and then you just email it over by the 26th. And so I am going to stop sharing the slides so that I can share the tally itself with you. So let me get that pulled up.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, the survey is only for one parent or guardian, as we call the head of household, based off of the number of family households or single households you have in your shelter. And this tally spreadsheet is for all residents. So you want to make sure that you're including, if there's a family of 6, you want to make sure that you have the head of household plus all the other members of the family and their demographic information recorded in this spreadsheet.
Yep, so basically what this will be is the tally spreadsheet for everybody. You will, for agency, you guys can just put your new arrival shelters. For program name, there will be a drop-down list here that will include the variety of shelters that we have that you'll be able to choose from. If yours for some reason is not there, I'll include in other options so that you can then kind of indicate when you email it over what site it's coming from. The site address also would let us know that, so you'll fill that in, and then the contact person name and phone number for the best contact as to who filled out the tally on the night of the count. And then basically this is what the tally will be. So the first column will be individual number. We ask you do not change this. It just allows us to have a unique number for each person on site. The household number is a unique identifier per household. So again, if it's a single person alone, they'll get a 1. For the first person, if it's another single person, they'd get 2, so on and so forth. If it's a family, you would put any family members under the same number. So say it was a family of 2 people here, they would both get household number 3. And I'll have an example version of that you guys will get as well, because I know it can get a little bit confusing. For household type, there's a sort of single individual or family designation, so you'll choose that. For the relationship to head of household, it's either the self, the head of household themselves, the head of household child, head of household spouse or partner, head of household's other relation member, other relation to head of household. So we know that some of your families are a little bit more intergenerational, so that sort of thing. Other non-relation members shouldn't be very relevant, but it might come up. Client doesn't know or prefer not to answer. Date of birth, we're asking that you enter that in the month, date, year format, as you can see up here. So if somebody was born July 29th of 2000, you would put 0729 to 0000. Client age, we have a drop down, but it's basically just any number between, I think the drop down goes up to 120 years old, just their age. The entry date in the program, if you have that, again, in month, date, year format. If it's unknown, put in unknown. For gender, there are a couple of options that they can choose, and they can choose more than one. So if someone identifies as a woman, you'll just put woman as the response there. If someone identifies maybe as like a transgender man, you would put both of those in transgender, and then you would use the plus sign and put man. And so you type in both options, separating them just with a plus sign so that we can tell that there is kind of a multiple response there. And then same for race and ethnicity. So if people are identifying, they can choose more than one. I know last year most people identified as white and Hispanic or Latin or Latino. They can also say they don't know or that they prefer not to answer for this one as well. But there's those. And then the last column will be surveyed tonight. So you will say if you surveyed them or if you did not survey them in that last column there, just so that we can kind of tell from this who was a part of your survey population. We have in the spreadsheet you will get with the shelter tally as well, this response options guide that lists out all of the options that are in the drop downs in case you are gonna do this in like a printed version rather than doing it online right away, so that you would be able to see all of the options that should go into each of them. We do ask that we receive it in an online version, so tends to be easier to just do it in the Excel already rather than doing it by hand and then having to transfer it, but it is up to you how you want to go about it. So we wanted to make sure you had access to kind of the drop-down responses. And then the last tab here that you'll have is an example. So again, just showing you an example of what responses could look like for the different categories that we just looked at. Over here on the families, you can see we have one single individual and then one family, and then two single individuals who are in a couple. So we have single individual 1 is household number 1. The family of 3 people are all household number 2. And then the single individuals that are a couple together are household number 3, because they're within the same household. And then the rest of it, yeah, just goes over the categories that we just went through. So you will have access to all of these tabs so that you can see it if you want to refer back to it, if you need to kind of see the example or remember what the options are or anything like that. Yep, Shannon, go ahead.
Thanks. So some of you may be wondering why the gender identity and the race/ethnicity categories, there's so many. This is just a little context if it's helpful, because I know, depending on a person, how they identify, some of these terms may not be as familiar to some folks from different countries. And so I think just try to do your best to explain the different options to folks if you are doing this live, unless you have like a tally or a census spreadsheet of this information already available, then you can use that. But these are categories that are mandated by HUD. So it's mandated by the federal government to include these, and the intention is to make sure that they're inclusive. So if people have different gender identities and identify with more than one race or ethnicity, that they can capture that accurately in this kind of categorization of different race ethnicity categories. Any questions about the tally? You can put questions in the chat or come off mute. All right, great.
All right. I will get us back to our slides then. Sorry, I have a lot of things open on my computer this time of year, so bring us back here really quick. With the tally sheet as well, what we will have for you guys is a tally reference guide. It looks very similar to that tab that I showed that includes the reference information for if you were going to fill out any of it in a printed, or like if you wanted like the printed guide as to what the response options are for filling it out. This version will just be a PDF rather than only within the Excel spreadsheet. So if you wanted the Excel on your computer and then the printed PDF next to you with the response options, we will provide you that as well. So it'll just list out the various data elements or columns and then what their response options are. So we will make sure to provide that to you as well. And so then going back to the survey that we talked about earlier, the 2024 shelter survey is an online survey again. Staff will access this through a SurveyMonkey link that we will email to all of you in advance of the count. And the survey will be available in both English and Spanish. In this screenshot, as you can see over here in the upper right corner, there is a little gray rectangle that says English. You'll be able to click that and it'll give you the option to switch to Spanish if you'd prefer to complete the survey in Spanish as well. They will be the same information, the same questions, all of that. It will just be the different languages in how it shows up on your screen. I will now switch us over to the survey specifically so that I can show you it. I am going to walk through it on the kind of just like design version of it so that I can just show you all of the questions. There is logic built into the survey that changes dependent on what questions are answered in the survey. So I will point out where that might occur, but it's just a little bit quicker to show you it this way. So the first page is going to be the 2024 Pitt Count Sheltered Survey page here. I can move this over and make it a little bit bigger for you guys. There we go. And so it's going to say, thank you for completing this, with about 10% of the household staying in your program tonight. You'll put in your shelter program. This dropdown will include all the shelter options, as well as the landing zone and O'Hare. If yours, for some reason, does not happen to be there, you can always type it in as well, but it should be there. You'll put in your interviewer name and phone number, so just the person that is completing the survey, like the staff person completing it. You'll put your information. That's just in case we need to follow up with you about anything. And then the questions past this point are relevant to the respondent, not the interviewer. So when we're asking, are you willing to participate in a survey, we're asking the client, not you as the staff person. Ideally, people will say yes. If they say no, do not force anyone to complete the survey. Just move on to the next person until you reach the 10% of households that you need to. But if they say yes, it'll go to the next page down here. It'll ask, have you completed any other surveys tonight regarding homelessness? Realistically, they should not have. If they say that they did, it will end the survey again because we're not trying to double count them. If they say no, or they prefer not to answer, it will go to the next page. The next page is going to be those demographic questions, similar to what's on the tally. So we're going to ask for people's initials. We know people don't necessarily always have middle names in the same way. So it's kind of first name, like second name and last name here. If people just want to do first and last, they can also do that. It's okay. Date of birth, again, is in that format of month, date, year. If they don't want to give their exact date of birth, you can instead put them into one of these age estimates, dependent on what their age is. Gender identity, again, similar to the tally, you can pick as many as they feel like they identify with. And it's, again, same for race and ethnicity. The questions right here on have you ever served in the United States military, very unlikely that that would be relevant. However, we have a standardized survey, so it is the survey that we ask the general population, so they stay here. Realistically, people will say no on this one, I would assume, and so it will skip these two questions about the war era or active duty membership in the National Guard. If they say yes for some reason, you can answer those questions, I suppose, but I foresee no being the answer. Next will be, are you pregnant or do you have a pregnant partner? Just no, yes, don't know, prefer not to answer. And then if you have any children, are you their current primary caregiver day to day? If they say no, it'll skip the children questions. If they say yes, it'll go to this section on questions about their children. The first one is, how many children are staying with you tonight? So you would write in the number of children staying with them. And then these questions you only will have to fill out for the number of children they say. So if they only say 2 children are staying with them, you only have to fill out the information for child 1 and child 2, obviously, because there are not childs 3 through 10 then. But again, you just fill out gender of the children and race and age of the children. Gender, again, they can choose as many as they want. Age, they can only choose 1 age per child. The final set of questions then is going to be a little bit about some of their kind of previous experiences with homelessness. And so there are going to be, these might get a little bit confusing for this population, especially because there might be a difference in understanding of whether they feel like they even are experiencing homelessness right now. For most people, this probably will be their first experience of homelessness. So it's likely they'll say yes to question number 18 here. If they say no, that's also fine. It'll ask, how long have you been experiencing homelessness this most recent time? And then how many separate experiences of homelessness have you had over the past 3 years? Again, it seems pretty likely most people will say this is their only experience, so it'll be 1. But if people do identify with experiencing homelessness another time in the past 3 years, they might give you another option, like 2 or 3 times. And so we have those options. And then if you added up the amount of time you've experienced homelessness during the past 3 years, about how much time would that include? If it's 1 time, it's just the amount of time they've experienced homelessness this time. If it's 2 times, it's how long they've experienced it this time and how long they experienced it for that time before this one. And you'll just want to add those up to get your total for one of these choices. The other questions then will be kind of what cause or causes led you to losing your housing. For a lot of individuals, they'll probably identify with seeking asylum in the United States, but they might also identify with other things that they felt caused them to move here or kind of lose their prior housing. So if they identify with any of these other options, you can choose as many of them that they feel they identify with. Have you ever received or has anyone told you you would benefit from receiving services for any of the following? We ask that you kind of read the options again and they can choose as many as they identify with, if any at all. Are you currently employed or seeking employment? There's like if they say no, just kind of either asking if they are seeking employment still or if they are not seeking employment. If they say yes, asking if it's full-time or part-time work. I know that that's a question that can be a little bit difficult with people's ability to kind of seek work in the current situation as well. So just what people are willing to kind of report to you, or if they don't want to answer it, you can always say prefer not to answer as well. And then the foster care system, again, I don't think that that will be particularly relevant to this population, but they have the options. And then, have you ever been involved in juvenile detention, jail, prison, or probation or conditional release? And then finally, have you been threatened or harmed by someone you know or had to flee from domestic or dating violence? If they say no to this question, it will end the survey. If they say yes, there's one more question just about if they feel that that experience with domestic or dating violence caused their current experience of homelessness. So you'll respond to that, and then it will end the survey. Once the survey ends, there will be an option to kind of go back to like the top of the survey so that you can start your next survey with the next participant as well. And so that is kind of what the survey looks like for the PIT this year. And again, that will be available in both English and in Spanish. And so does anyone have any questions on the survey before we move on from there? All right, I'm gonna hand it back to you then, Shannon.
Thanks, Sarah. So in terms of count dues, this is just to kind of remind you of a few things as we get ready to wrap up. So you just want to make sure that if you are the one administering the survey, that you explain what you're doing as part of the point in time count to residents and how important their participation is. Of course, the survey is anonymous and voluntary, and survey participants can stop participating or answering questions in the survey or skip questions at any time. The information used is to help improve services, obtain federal funding, and support people experiencing homelessness or new arrivals in our city. So just some little talking points if you have to have your elevator pitch. It's helpful. And then we want to just ensure that folks feel like they understand the online survey methodology, just in terms of trying to get 10% of your households, just one head of household from each family unit or individual household to be randomly selected. And so based on the total family units or total individual households that you have on shelter, you want to make sure that you have that head of household list prepared prior to the night of the count, or the day. It might be good to prepare that the day of the count, actually. You need to make sure that you choose a system to randomize what households get selected. And so if folks have questions about that, or you want to talk through anything, we can spend a little bit of time answering or discussing that piece at the end of this training. This will obviously be a bit easier for shelters that have single households, so adult men and adult single women, just because they are usually identified as their own household. And so it will just require a little bit more planning and thoughtfulness for the shelters that have families. A second. Thanks for meeting. So for the family shelters, you'll just have to have that list prepared ahead of time of one parent or guardian for each family unit, and then randomly pull them the night of. You should only be serving heads of households, so single adults, parents, or the main guardian of one household, and then unaccompanied youth between 18 to 24 can also be surveyed, just not serving children, please. And then you'll want to complete your Excel tally spreadsheet for all clients on site, including family members within one household. You'll need to email that to us at the DFSS email provided on this screen by the end of business day, like 5 p.m. on Friday, the 26th. And then after you complete your count, which includes both the surveying and the tallying portions on the night of the 25th, you'll want to give us a call at our DFSS office. We'll have a member of the new arrivals team stationed with us at the DFSS office just to help kind of coordinate and make sure folks are feeling supported from the new arrival system. And then in terms of don'ts for the count, so for shelters, please do not begin your count earlier than 7 p.m. unless you're given permission. Don't worry, don't panic if your count is not completed by 10 p.m., especially for some of the bigger sites. It might take you a little bit more time to get through that 10% of households. It's fine to continue counting and tallying as needed, and just to make sure that you capture all the people in your tally spreadsheet on site, since that's due the next day, but you need to record it for all residents who stay the night of the 25th. And then you do need to make sure that you finish serving all the 10% of households that same night that the pit count happens. For O'Hare and the landing zone, you should not begin your count until 9 p.m. Unless given permission, and that's just because of some of the fluctuation and movement of people, away from the landing zone in the earlier hours. So starting a little bit later seemed to make more sense based off of what we had discussed with the folks on site. And then you'll want to continue serving and tallying as well until you reach all the residents as well as the 10% of households. Just some other tips. Please do not deviate from the survey. Just try to follow the survey as best as you can. You can toggle between the English and Spanish, of course. We're also waiting for translation of a paper version of the survey to be available in French, since we do know that there is more need with French-speaking populations of people in some of the shelters. So we're just waiting for that to be finalized. Please do not survey the same household more than once. So you should only be serving one parent or one guardian for family households. Don't force individuals to participate in the survey if they don't want to. And then again, please don't survey children for any family staying in your program, but unaccompanied youth are okay to be surveyed. Okay, Blanca, that's actually helpful to know that you have 2 Portuguese speaking individuals. I think we're trying to figure out if there's potentially like a language line that we can also use. So I think depending on the need, if there is a language need, you can also call our DFSS hotline number the night of if they're one of the families or individuals selected to be surveyed. And if that need is there, we can try and coordinate something. I think we're trying to see on our end with the language line and the hours of operation at night. We just want to see if there's additional support that we can provide you. But if you do need something regarding language or translation services, in addition to Spanish, French, or English, you can call the DFSS number that's on this screen. And yeah, this is just kind of a recap. So yeah, similar information that I shared before: shelter count from 7 to 10 p.m. O'Hare landing zone count from 9 p.m. to about 12 a.m. midnight. DFSS will be emailing you all the information, including the survey link, the tally spreadsheet form, the guide, by the 24th, which I think is next Wednesday. And these are just for you to be able to familiarize yourself. So please understand that they should not be used or have information entered into them until the night of the count, during the time that we've allotted for both of these counts to take place. And then if you don't receive this email with this follow-up information, please reach out to our DFSS email that's on this sheet. And then again, once you've completed your count, you'll want to call us at that number and then email your tally to that same email on Friday, end of day, once you've completed that for all residents the night of the count. Oh yeah, and this is just that reminder with the landing zone. We're meeting with the state and we'll follow up on Monday to finalize coordination for the point in time count. We appreciate everybody's patience and flexibility with this, and we'll just make sure to share any additional information or potential updates after that meeting. And that's our email again. You've had it, seen it a few times, but we'll make sure to share it out when we send out that email as well. We'll include this training recording as well as the presentation slides. So if that's helpful for you to facilitate to other folks that will be participating in the count, that should be pretty easy to do so. And I think, yeah, we have a bit of time left for any questions. If folks want to come off mute or put any other questions in the chat, we're happy to answer some questions and clarify things.
Good afternoon. I do have a question. And let's say that for my site, 10% is 8 households, and one of them says they don't want to participate in the survey. So would I need to identify another household, or would I just move on and consider that one that denied taking the survey as one of the 8?
That is a great question. So the best practice is that if you get a household that one of the 8 of those households that you randomly selected does not want to consent, you need to then randomly select another household to make sure that you get to that 10% mark for all the households at your site. So essentially you would then choose, let's assume that the next household you chose consents to taking the survey. And so if that household goes to the survey, you've reached your 8 completed surveys to meet the 10% of households randomly surveyed at Super 8. So
Awesome.
you'd select 9, but you'd only survey 8, and we count the survey completion number as the finalized number for how many households need to be giving that information. Good question. Yes, I think Mickey, go for it.
Hi, Shannon. Thank you. I just had a question. I'm a little confused regarding the age of unaccompanied youth. So this shelter is singles only. So nobody they're not, nobody that's between the ages of 18, 20 to 24 can complete the survey.
So actually, Sarah, do you mind going back to that slide? That's also a good clarifying point. So youth, there's like a specific definition for what a youth is from the federal government. And it's anyone who is under the age of 25. And it's because they're kind of like young adults that HUD and, a lot of COCs like Chicago are just interested in understanding information about that subpopulation. So you definitely can interview. I know there's a lot of younger new arrivals as well, and like who also come on their own as their own households. So you can survey youth between the ages of 18 to 24 if they're in their own household. So if you have 18-year-olds that might be there with like their parents and their grandparents, you would prioritize the person in that family unit that has been kind of identified as like the head of household family member. So you likely wouldn't be interviewing the youth in that family household. However, if the youth is on their own as a single household and they're in Chicago and they're between that 18 to 24-year-old range, you can definitely interview them as long as they consent to participating in the survey.
Understood. That explains it. Thank you so much.
No worries. And the reason we chose 18, of course, is because if it's like an unaccompanied minor, that just has other implications. And just for consent purposes, 18 to 24, that's the best guidance.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you so much, Shannon.
No worries. Thank you. Alrighty. There's no other questions. I think we can let you all go then, and we'll make sure if you have follow-up questions, you can reach out to us on the DFSS homeless email. Natalia, BJ, and some of the other project managers also know how to get into contact with us. So if you have any, last minute questions or whatnot, please let us know. We're here to support you. And just want to reiterate how much we appreciate all of your willingness to do this. I know it's